chosen to love. Chuck Swindoll tells of a very cute Mother's Day card he saw one time. It was a big card that the illustrator had written the words on the card in the form of a small child's printing. And on the front cover was a little boy with an untied sneaker. He had a wagon and toys were everywhere. He had a little cut on his face and there were smudges all over the card as if the child had handled the card before giving it to his mom. And on the front it read, "Mom, I remember that little prayer you used to say for me every day." And then you open it up and it says, "God help you if you ever do that again." That little story reminded me immediately of the comic sensation that ran for several decades, Dennis the Menace, remember him? By Hank Ketchum. If you'll remember Dennis, he was a precocious little boy. He was always getting himself into trouble. He was particularly adept at making things difficult for his neighbor, Mr. Wilson. Dennis's antics were reckless, but Dennis always came off in the comic strip as a bit naive, not sure what he'd done that was wrong. He always seemed to have the best of intentions in whatever he was doing, no matter the outcome. One thing I noticed, however, is that no matter how bad Dennis's behavior was, he was still loved by his parents. He was certainly still loved by Mrs. Wilson, who just adored him. And I think deep down inside, even Mr. Wilson loved him too. No matter how dirty, how banged up, or what he had broken, Dennis was always loved. He was always wanted. The love he experienced was not dependent on his behavior. Dennis didn't have to earn his love. Instead, it was given freely without any qualification. I also don't ever remember a time, maybe you can recall one, that Dennis was ever beaten for being bad. He may have had to sit in the corner, and it happened a lot, sit in the corner for a timeout, but I never ever remember reading in the comic strip that he was threatened with bodily harm. I think part of the charm of Dennis the Menace was that he did things that we all wish we had tried, but we didn't. Why did we hold back? Ever think about that? I bet we held back because we were afraid. We were in fear. Fear of retribution, and frankly, rightly so. How many of you, I found this amazing, how many of you saw that amazing video out of Baltimore the last week or so of a mother who has become this folk hero because she went to the riots and she unmasked her son who was participating in the riots. And there's a video of her chasing her son around the streets of Baltimore, smacking him across the top of his head for being so stupid as to participate in the riots. This mother has now become a kind of folk hero. Some are calling her even Mother of the Year. The local police of Baltimore have even praised her efforts. The only question I have is, what tool is she using to discipline her son? It's fear. For many people growing up, discipline was based on fear. Don't do that or I'll spank you, or I'll ground you, I'll throw you out in your ear. So much of our developing character was formed by fear of consequence. It's no wonder that so many Christians today see God in a similar fashion. They cultivate within themselves a morality based on avoiding God's displeasure. Actually, that boils down to a works theology. Did you know that? We become convinced that we have to earn God's good favor, just as we had to earn our parents' good favor. While maintaining good behavior out of fear may benefit the parent's goal of control of the child, you know what? It's exhausting and it's demoralizing to the child. Children, therefore, grow up believing that they're never good enough. So two things can happen. One, the child can rebel against parental or any other authority, just like all those young people in Baltimore. Or second, they can be so defeated by their sense of failure that they just stop trying to live any kind of an independent life. And both situations are clearly undesirable. In 1 John 4:16, we read John's observation that perfect love casts out fear. So important are these words to me anyway that I actually have them on a plaque in my office on the shelf wall there where I can read them every day. And these words remind me that intimidation and coercion and blackmail and threats are never, ever based on the kind of love God requires of us. If we think of our character or our approach to life as a location, Jesus says to us in our gospel lesson today, remain in my love. In Jesus' sacrificial, all-encompassing love, that is where we are to remain. That is where we are to live our lives. When we live in His love, there is no fear. And we would never turn to fear to coerce someone. Perhaps we may wonder what this place of love looks like. So we can identify it, so we can learn to stay there. Well, Jesus tells us that the place of perfect love is a place of overflowing joy. We also know that we are in this place of love when we are willing to lay down our lives for others. This, of course, means the ultimate sacrifice of dying for someone else, but it's much more than that. It means setting aside our needs, our wants, our resources, our egos, to put the other person first. Was that the nature of the home you grew up in? Is that what your home looks like now? The consequences of a home not operating out of a place of perfect love can be absolutely devastating. Many years ago, at the turn of the last century, there was a long-term project that was begun where two families in the state of New York were studied very carefully over generations. One was the Max Jukes family, and the other was the Jonathan Edwards family. You might have heard of Jonathan Edwards, incredible theologian and preacher. And what the study found was remarkable, as it is cautionary. Now, Max Juke was an unbelieving man, and he married a woman of like character. And both Mr. and Mrs. Jukes lacked good character. Followed for several generations, the researchers were able to find 1,200 descendants of Mr. and Mrs. Jukes. Of those descendants, 310 became lifelong vagrants. That means they never ever had a home. 440 physically wrecked their lives by living a debauched lifestyle. 130 were jailed for an average of 13 years. 7 were jailed for murder. There were over 100 that became alcoholics, 60 became habitual thieves, 190 were prostitutes, and of the 20, out of all the descendants, they only found 20 that learned a trade. And 10 of them did learn a trade, but it was in prison. And this training cost the taxpayers $1.5 million, and they made no contribution to society. In that same year, the family of Jonathan Edwards came on the scene. Jonathan Edwards was a man of God, and he married a like-minded wife who was of outstanding character. Out of their descendants, remember, 300 became ministers, missionaries, or theological professors. Over 100 became college professors. 100 became attorneys, 30 of those became judges, 60 became doctors, 60 became noted authors, 14 became presidents of universities. From that same family, there arose several giants of American industry. 3 became United States congressmen, and 1 became the Vice President of the United States. Which of these two families do you think was at least partially residing in Christ's love? I'm sure that the parents of the Edwards clan would say that they were not perfect parents, but they knew where they had to aim to remain. I'm no sociologist, but I'm pretty sure that one of the leading causes of dysfunction in families is fear. Parents fear a loss of control. They fear financial collapse. They fear their children might embarrass them, or fear their children will not love and care for them when they get older. Children fear failure in their parents' eyes. They fear physical punishment. They fear their parents' marriage ending, and so much more. Fear, fear, everywhere fear. And we know fear makes us say things and do things we shouldn't. Jesus has commanded that we should love one another, and surely that includes our families. If you don't think there's a problem in our society because of what's going on in families, then you haven't been paying attention. Dr. James Dobson, of Focus on the Family, in his book, Love Must Be Tough, talks about the consequences of instability in families among children. And Dobson recalls a conversation he had with a 6th grade teacher in an upper middle class city in California. These aren't poor kids. As a creative writing assignment, the teacher asked her students to complete the sentence that began, "I wish." Being a 6th grade teacher, the teacher expected things like, "I wish for a bike or a dog or a trip to Hawaii," etc. Instead, what she got back was heartbreaking. Absolutely heartbreaking. As 20 of the 30 children made reference to their disintegrating families. 20 of the 30. A few of the actual responses are as follows. "I wish my parents wouldn't fight. I wish my father would come back. I wish my mother didn't have a boyfriend. I wish I could get straight A's so my father would love me. I wish I had one mom and one dad so the kids wouldn't make fun of me. I've had 3 moms and 3 dads and they botched up my life." It's racist kids. And finally, this very disturbing one. "I wish I had an M1 rifle so I could shoot those who make fun of me." It's so naive to think there isn't a problem. Even if we do a great job of raising our children in love and not fear, the same cannot be said for the children who go to school with them. The problem doesn't end when high school's over either. In every workplace, community group, even in many churches, every time any number of human beings get together, there are going to be people who were raised and maybe currently live in a place of fear and not love. And you see the consequences of this all the time. People governed by fear are the people who resist change. They lash out at the least little irritant. They defend their positions no matter how irrational. People governed by fear are always wanting affirmation, attention, and power. You meet grown adults who are still trying to please their parents, even if their parents have died long ago. In the secular world of business and academia, one would not expect love to govern. Love to the secular world is irrelevant. What matters are tangible things like money and accomplishment. So if we can't find love, or a place of love we need, to be a whole person in the workplace, where are we going to find it? Why, the only place that ultimately really matters in character development and sustainability, and that place is the home. A child, a husband, or a wife who cannot find perfect, sacrificial love at home will seek cheap substitutes out in the world. And it happens all the time. And dare I say it's happened to some who are here in this very room. They've experienced that tragedy. Even people who believe they are safe from such things find themselves blindsided when their happy home suddenly isn't as happy as they thought. Many years ago, the pop group, the Bee Gees, had a song that read, "How deep is your love?" And it may be a more profound question than you'd expect from the 70s pop music group. There is, I believe, a hidden danger today, and I hesitate to raise it, but it has to be done. Today, we're going to offer our mothers, our grandmothers, other significant women in our lives, tokens of our appreciation. It is expected of us today, and Hallmark is counting on it for their bottom line. Yeah, they are. But I wonder how much of it's just window dressing. Do we delude ourselves into thinking that a bunch of flowers or brunch with mom means everything is okay? That by taking care of social expectations today, everything is right at home? Perhaps it is easier to pretend we have joy today as a family rather than question whether we actually reside in a place of love. But don't fret. We are not without hope. If we sincerely believe all is not right in our families, Jesus offers us a refuge. If we remain in His love, we will find true joy and perfect love that casts out fear. When we remain in His love, like Dennis the Menace, we find that even if we make mistakes, we are still loved and we are still wanted. Why? Because the more we reside in Christ's love, the more our earthly family begins to resemble the heavenly family of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Whether a family is dysfunctional or not, it is not by chance. Whether a child grows up to be a well-adjusted adult is not because of the throw of the dice. The Houston Police Department had a memo that used to circulate for years. It was entitled 12 Rules, 12 Ways, if you like, for Raising Delinquent Children. Here's what they wrote. Begin with infancy by giving a child everything he wants. In this way, he will believe the world owes him a living. Number 2, you want him to be a delinquent? Whenever he picks up that vulgar word, laugh at him. This will make him think he's cute. Number 3, never give him spiritual training. Wait until he's 21 and let him decide. Number 4, always avoid the use of the word wrong. It might develop a guilt complex. This will condition him to believe later that when he's arrested that society is against him and he is being persecuted. Number 5, pick up everything he leaves around the house. Do everything for him so he will be experienced in throwing all responsibility on other people. Number 6, let him read any printed material he gets his hand on. Be careful that the silverware and drinking glasses are sterilized, but let his mind be filled with filth. Number 7, quarrel frequently in the presence of your children. This way they won't be shocked when the home is broken up later on. Number 8, give the child all the spending money he wants. Never make him earn his own. 9, satisfy his every craving for food, drink, and comfort. See that every sensual desire is gratified, holding nothing back. 10, take his part against neighbors and officers of the law and teachers. They are all prejudiced against your child. Number 11, when he gets into trouble, apologize for yourself by saying, I never could do anything with that boy anyway. And finally, number 12, prepare yourself for a life of grief. You will likely have it. The point is that we can do something for the next generation. I think we can do something for the current and previous generations too, by challenging each other to a life of Christ-centered love in our families. For when we honor God by remaining in Christ's love, Jesus tells us that God will give us whatever we ask for, including the family life we all need and we all long for. Let us pray. Gracious Lord, we all need family. We all want family. But sometimes our families are dysfunctional. They are rife with problems. And fear is what rules in our home. Father, help us to be governed by love. Help us to remain in your love. Help us to accept each other, to love each other, and not force each other to earn our love and our appreciation. In this way, we honor you, we honor each other, and we help our young to grow up confident in this world. Amen.